Good evening to the Housing Commission, the city staff, and the general public. I would like to introduce staff and Housing Commissioner members present. Roll call, Housing Manager Tim Wong, Management Analyst Adam Patterson, and Principal Partner Tom Smith, Commissioner Campos, Commissioner Leach, Commissioner Merriman, Chair O'Neill. I am actually participating remotely via the Brown Act. Commissioner Pimentel, Commissioner Portillo, and Vice Chair Walker.
Let's call roll one more time so we can see who's present and who is absent. If you could just go through one more time, Chair O'Neill.
I would like to introduce staff and Housing Commission members present. Housing Manager Tim Wong, Management Analyst Adam Patterson, and Principal Partner Tom Smith, and additional city staff members. Commissioner Campos.
That's it.
Commissioner Leach.
Here.
Commissioner Merriman.
Here.
Chair O'Neill, I am actually participating remotely by the Brown Act. Commissioner Pimentel.
Absent.
Commissioner Portillo. Commissioner Portillo.
Here. Yes, here.
Vice Chair Walker.
Present.
Thank you. Tim, would you please provide instructions to the Housing Commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Okay, this is a little out of order, but Chair, if you could officially call the meeting to order.
Oh, well, forgive me. It's still 5:30 a.m. here. You got that. Yes, the meeting now is in order at 6:34. No, it's 6:34 p.m. I hope I get that time right because I'm looking at the current time here.
Okay. So thank you, Chair. And so for members of the thank you, Chair O'Neill, and members of the Housing Commission. Welcome everyone to the January 18th special meeting of the Housing Commission, and thank you for your attendance. Staff will engage cameras and microphones to make presentations at this hybrid meeting and respond to members of the Housing Commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment on an item for tonight's agenda, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, for virtual participants, please engage the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. For those who are calling in from a landline or cell phone, please press *9. For those in person, please complete a speaker card and bring it to the staff desk. So that concludes the instructions, and I return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. First, we have item C1 to approve the Housing Commission meeting minutes for August 2nd and September 6th of 2023.
I only see August 2nd.
No, it's on page C 1.8 from the back of after the presentation. After what day? Yeah,
Oh,
September 6th.
the HIP housing
Yes.
letter on the back. Oh, got the.
Yeah.
This item is open for public comment. Tim, do we have any public comment regarding the minutes?
No public comment. No public comment.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Okay. And this item is open for Housing Commission clarifying questions and discussion.
I did have a question pertaining to September 6th minutes. Is Housing Inc. fully onboarded now?
Yes, they are. The question, yes, they are. They're fully on board and we're working with them. But just to remind the commission that these questions pertain to the minutes, but
Oh,
yes, they are
okay.
fully on board.
Got it. Okay, that was all mine. So I move to approve the minutes for, August 2nd to September 6th. I second the motion.
Commissioner Campos, absent. Sorry, I will call, motions, by Commissioner Leach to adopt the minutes, seconded by Commissioner Walker. I will call the roll call for the vote. Commissioner Campos, absent. Commissioner Leach,
Aye.
Commissioner Merriman,
Aye.
Chair O'Neill,
Aye.
Commissioner Pimentel, absent. Commissioner Portillo,
Aye.
Vice Chair Walker,
Aye.
the motion passes.
Should I proceed, Adam?
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay. Principal Planner Tom Smith is going to introduce the item, provide the presentation.
Good evening, Chair ONAP and members of the Housing Commission. Thank you for having this special meeting this evening to review updates, amendments to the adopted housing element, the adopted 2023 to 2031 housing element as conditionally approved by the California Department of Housing and Community Development. So I have a brief presentation that I will share with you this evening. So first, I'll give a little bit of background. Beginning in 2021, the city embarked on almost 2 years of public meetings and gathering community input to update the city's general plan housing element. The housing element is a plan to address the city's housing needs for an 8-year period that spans from 2023 to 2031. And it includes a list of projects and sites that could exceed the development of nearly 3,000 housing units that are required during that time. The housing element includes goals, policies, and programs to encourage housing production, to improve equity in the community, and to help reduce disparities in housing throughout the city. The housing element, you can think of it basically as a high-level roadmap for the 8-year planning period. And it includes 69 different programs in the document that cover a range of actions like supporting affordable housing development, encouraging housing for special needs populations, promoting sustainable and resilient housing, and other goals like that. The programs include a brief description of each intended action and the specific steps and details of each of those 69 different programs would be worked out during the 8-year period as the housing element is implemented. The Housing Commission and Planning Commission held a joint meeting on January 12th of last year, so just a little over a year ago today, and recommended approval of the housing element. and the City Council considered the Housing and Planning Commission's recommendations and adopted the housing element on January 31st of last year. The housing element was then submitted to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, which is called HCD for short, and that entered into a period of review by HCD. Throughout 2023, HCD and the city discussed a couple of rounds of revisions to the adopted housing element, which were approved by the City Council. And I'll highlight some of those changes a little bit more in a later slide in this presentation. In December of last year, so just about a month ago, HCD indicated that the revised housing element was substantially compliant with housing element law, and certification could be granted once the revisions were adopted by the City Council. On January 8th, the Planning Commission recommended that the Council adopt the revisions to the housing element. And that brings us to this evening, where the Housing Commission has the opportunity to make its recommendation to the City Council. I wanted to highlight some of the key programs of interest in the housing element. I think these are things that we've heard that the Housing Commission is specifically interested in, or within the element, there are mentions of the Housing Commission involvement, and throughout conversations that we've had over the past year, or really since 2021, these programs have tended to be among those discussed more frequently. So the first one I would highlight is an anti-displacement strategy. That is program H2E of the housing element. And that is a strategy that would involve community engagement to formulate ways to reduce displacement. And it could include a range of different elements like tenant education to connect tenants to housing supportive programs and make sure that tenants are aware of their legal rights, and aware of opportunities for rental assistance, also looking at expansion of just cause eviction provisions, increased relocation assistance, and a range of other measures that could fall under that anti-displacement strategy. So again, you can think of these programs as sort of the high-level framework of where we want to go. The details of these programs would be worked out through this 8-year period that we are currently in. The second program that I would highlight, actually this is a 2-part program, would be updates to the BMR guidelines. And so those are programs H4A and H4B of the housing element. And those programs would look at amending the BMR guidelines and evaluating potential changes like increasing the BMR requirements, providing density bonuses for certain types of development that the city really wants to highlight and prioritize, and then ways to help prioritize 100% affordable housing development, rental housing that's affordable at moderate and lower incomes, housing for individuals with disabilities, other priorities that the commission and the council may wish to implement as part of that update. Another program would be affordable housing on the city-owned parking lots downtown. That's program H4G of the housing element. And that would prioritize development of affordable housing on some of the downtown parking lots on an expedited schedule. The housing element lays out a path through 2027. So that's quite aggressive, considering that we're already at the beginning of 2024. But what we heard from the commission and then from the council was really an interest in prioritizing this program and making sure that we were really striving to get that affordable housing downtown on our city-owned parking lots. Another program is the Fair Chance Ordinance. So that would be program H5A, and it would be an ordinance that would prohibit housing providers from using criminal background as a factor in tenant selection. And then finally, one program that I would highlight is community outreach and implementing the housing element programs. So the programs above and all of the tens of other programs, looking at ways to increase outreach through various different channels, including housing element or housing commission meetings, to make sure that we have broad public engagement in the housing element implementation and getting robust feedback from the community on these programs as they're implemented. Attachment F of the staff report includes an extensive list of changes to the housing element since the Housing Commission last reviewed it in January of last year. And I'll just pick through a few of the more significant changes that were made since January of last year. So there's a mid-cycle review program, that's program H1H. And that program is really a check-in at the midpoint of the cycle through 2031 to see how we're doing in meeting all of our goals. So are we creating enough units? Have we built the projects that are in the pipeline now? Are we getting good use of our affordable housing overlay that would incentivize affordable housing development? Are we still reducing governmental constraints that might make it more difficult to build housing, things like that? So that's a program that's been updated. The emergency shelters program, that's program H3G, was updated to reduce parking requirements to the maximum needed for shelter staff only, and that is to bring our city ordinance into compliance with state law. The city-owned parking lots program that I just mentioned in the last slide, H4G, that was updated throughout the process to award additional merit to proposals that would address certain housing priorities in the city, such as extremely and very low income units, units for people with special needs, other preferences like that. And then finally, the environmental justice program, which is program H5J, is a new program that has been added since January of last year. And that is to highlight and create links between the housing element and the environmental justice element that is currently being developed, potentially making use of community amenities funds in the Bellhaven area to implement programs from the environmental justice element, and implementing at least one environmental justice element program annually. So environmental justice is looking at ways to reduce disparities throughout the community, provide more equity, and get more community engagement in our processes. So I'll end with this slide for recommendation and next steps. Staff is recommending that the Housing Commission use this evening's meeting to make a recommendation to the City Council to adopt the proposed amendments to the housing element since last January. After discussions with HCD and the City Council to enhance and clarify the adopted housing element throughout 2023, a recommendation of adoption would indicate the Housing Commission's support for the housing element and its implementation. HCD has indicated its satisfaction with the housing element revisions and would allow final certification of the document after the amendments are adopted by the City Council. And staff would also be able to dedicate more focus towards implementing the housing element programs, knowing that we're working from a fully certified housing element recognized by the state. The City Council is tentatively scheduled to review the Housing and Planning Commission's recommendations on January 23rd. And if the housing element amendments are adopted, staff would submit the document to HCD for final certification shortly after. So with that, I will end my presentation and return it to you, Chair Onap.
Tim, do we have any public comment?
There's that. We do not.
Okay. So this item is now open for public comment, and if we don't have any, then now this item is open for Housing Commission for purpose of clarifying questions and discussion.
I have I just had one small clarifying question. the emergency shelters, the reducing the parking maximum is to remove like a a barrier to having the emergency shelters built, is that?
Correct. The idea would be to reduce parking requirements, so you wouldn't have to utilize as much land towards parking vehicles, and really you're only parking for the staff that would be working on the site.
Okay, that's good to know.
Do we have any other questions from the Housing Commission?
I don't think so, Chair.
I'm curious about the number of programs that are listed. And planning is great. And then as soon as your plan complete, you fit into doing. And I'm wanting to check in with staff about kind of the transition there between this plan and then operationalizing some of the goals of the city.
Tom, would you like to start address, or, and then maybe I'll hop on?
I actually had a little bit of trouble hearing the question. Could you rephrase that for me?
Sure. This has been a long planning period, a fruitful planning period, and there are many programs that are identified here. As you transition from planning to implementing and operationalizing some of the, I guess, aspirations in here, goals in here, I wanted to check in with staff about kind of how the arc of that transition is happening. When does the
Right.
planning end and doing start?
Yeah, so actually we have already begun the implementation process. One thing that I did not mention here in the presentation is that a number of the programs in the housing element are related to zoning changes in order to increase densities on the sites and create more opportunities for housing development throughout the community. So what we actually already completed, the City Council adopted in November and December some amendments to our zoning ordinance and to our general plan land use element that essentially allow for increased density in the specific plan, the downtown area, that would allow up to potentially 100 dwelling units per acre of density on certain sites. And then also we've modified the zoning of a number of our commercial only zoning districts to make them mixed use districts, so that in essence, you could have development on certain sites that would have retail, a store, a small personal service type business on the ground floor with housing above it, whereas now it would just be limited to purely non-residential uses. And then we also implemented an update to our affordable housing overlay, which is a way to incentivize affordable housing development in the community and allowing a density there of up to 150 dwelling units per acre, potentially for 100% affordable housing. So a number of those programs we've managed to get adopted and approved, and we're set there. We do have, for all the other programs, we do have timing indicated in the housing element. As I said before, some of these programs are pretty ambitiously timed, but others leave a little bit more room for us to plan to implement those later in the cycle. And so I think based on our experience so far in achieving, I want to say like 7 or 8 of these programs that are listed here just in the first year, we feel like we're on a pretty good track, and I think it will be reasonable for us to implement them.
And if I may just add on, there will be certainly a division of labor that will be implemented in that city's housing division will take certain programs such as updating the BMR guidelines, looking at revamping maybe the commercial fees, some of those housing element programs. And we're still kind of sorting it through, but certainly planning and housing will work collaboratively to address other programs. But yes, understanding that the state requires that many of these programs get implemented earlier in the cycle, than later. But we'll address it, and our director Chow is here, if there's anything else to add, but yeah, we're definitely working on it.
I do have one, thank you, Commissioner Merriman, you gotta open the, how soon could the anti-displacement program be established, or has that already been adopted and implemented? And what would that, who would handle that, what would that look like?
Yeah, so the way that it's spelled out in the housing element is that this strategy is one of those very high priority items. So we'd be looking at beginning to implement that this year. So there's a range of actions that are listed here, potential actions. So it's sort of designed as some initial actions and then phasing in through 2026 additional elements of that program. So we should start to see quite a bit of movement on that this year, continuing through the next couple years.
Thank you.
Can I add Sharon coming up?
Barry, you're muted.
Oh, okay, sorry. Tom, I just have one clarifying question. Is there a timeline for either the public or any other city member or housing commission to provide feedback on this very aggressive proposal, like after it's been approved? The feedback of how the design should move forward, or any other feedback? Is there like a deadline or for this at all?
So each of these programs, like I said, is at a pretty high level. I think each of them will have to think through the process of different check-in points with different commissions and city council, and getting the engagement from the community as well. So in short, nothing has been solidly laid out yet for these programs. What I would say, one thing that you can be assured of is that each year, and it's usually in February or March, we have our annual progress report on the housing element, and we bring that to the Housing Commission so that you have a chance to see the progress we've made over the previous year, how many units have been developed, what programs have been implemented, and what we're working on. And then you can provide your feedback at that time. So at a minimum, you would see these and comment on them once a year. But I think there are certain programs where, as we get more into the development of the process and laying out the different checkpoints, we could give you more information about specific programs that you'd be weighing in on.
Okay, thank you so much, Tom. Anyone else from the commission?
One more question. So the question is, this process with HCD has been unlike any other. There is a lot more focus on accountability and enforcement of the state. And the timelines for approval really seem to be lengthened by a lot of additional scrutiny. With that as the backdrop, and the deadlines that were in place, my own personal alone in kind of this tail of the process stretching on, this is happening all over the state because of this additional work and additional review. So, has there been, is there, what are the problems for the city if this doesn't get kind of all the way completed? So like, what's really at stake with continuing to have this wonderful, sort of eponymous work product, magnum opus, if you will, kind of move through? Like what's at the end of the day? Tell us why it's important to move this forward now.
That's a great question. I think there are a couple individuals who maybe could give a overall answer for sort of repercussions of not meeting our goals that are laid out in the housing element. I would ask the Assistant City Attorney, Mary Wagner, if she might be able to weigh in on that for us.
I'm sure. I'm happy to start, Tom, and I'm sure that M Group may have some input as well. So I think you're right. I mean, this has been a whole new kind of cycle of housing element development and implementation, and there is a rather robust work program that's going to need to come forward in order to undertake all of the tasks that are identified in the housing element. As Tom indicated, I think the heavy lift of the zoning ordinance changes that are now in effect was a really good start to get those programs going, and something that HCD and the government code required us to do before the end of this month. So that was a very heavy lift by staff and a good thing to get checked off. With respect to your question about, well, what happens if we don't accomplish everything we have on our work program?
But I think the question to clarify is just like, what happens if we don't? It seems like you have this teed up for various final approvals with the committees, and so, what's the desire to, I know there's a desire to complete it, but what's really at stake, if it doesn't get all the way through the hurdles?
Are you talking about the adoption of the amendments to the housing element, or the programs in the housing element? I'm sorry, I had a little bit of a hard time hearing your question originally, so thanks for clarifying.
The item that we're supposed to recommend today.
So
Like if we were to recommend it, what would happen? I'm not saying that
Got
is
it.
what was happening.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. I was going down a much different path, so thanks for
Yeah, okay, yeah,
pulling-
that's like, that's
thanks for
interesting
pulling me back.
information. Yeah.
So, obviously the Housing Commission is a recommending body to the City Council. The City Council will ultimately decide whether or not to adopt these changes to the housing element that we received HCD's conditional certification on. If the Housing Commission were to say to the council, hey, we need more time, or hey, we think you should do something different, the council will take that into consideration at their meeting on the 23rd, I believe it is, and then make a determination on next steps.
So then the comment, but I want to make sure that it's the last comment. So if anyone else has comments, please.
No comments.
If you were to permit me, Chair, to put a motion on the table where we recommend approval and allow me to talk a little bit, I would appreciate that.
Tim, can we do this?
Yes.
Adam?
A motion.
Okay.
Yeah, unless you want, make sure we have no other comments from the group.
I do have a comment. So I know we talk about the homeless, and I know that there's other groups that are working with an element outside of the housing element. How are we addressing the homeless caption with the housing element for Menlo Park?
You on? Thank you. Yeah.
The question was how we're addressing.
The homeless, element, or the aspect on this element.
Yeah, there are policies and programs within the housing element that specifically speak to homelessness. So
Because
there
it
is
says it wasn't revised, so I'm assuming you guys didn't make edits on it, right?
right. Yes, we had like certain provisions. So one of the ones that I mentioned was reducing the parking requirements for emergency shelters, with the idea that usually what we hear from developers or from different businesses, different organizations, is that parking is one of the biggest challenges in the community. And so that's one way to help reduce a barrier there. There's a program to continue support for countywide homeless programs. That's program H3E. So committing to work with, for instance, the Veterans Administration, the Haven House emergency shelters programs, partnering with various nonprofits on outreach to people that are experiencing homelessness, collaboration with neighboring jurisdictions, including Project Homekey program, and support for multi-jurisdictional navigation centers. Things like that are built into the housing element. And I believe that those have not been modified throughout the process since last reviewed. So HCD was comfortable with the range of programs that we had to address the topic.
No, it doesn't touch on the mental, just on the mental aspect, because I think it goes beyond just housing. I think it's more, I think they need support more on, mental, maybe assistance, or maybe they need, medical or.
So Tom, if you want me to
Yeah.
chime in, a little bit, so, hi, good evening, thank you for having us this evening, Deanna Chavez, Community Development Director. So just to touch upon a little bit, I think Tom mentioned a number of partner agencies that help in the unhoused space, so mental health, so I think the term, wraparound services, so, how do we provide, shelter, how do we address maybe health care, how do we address mental health, looking at not just housing, but what are sort of the things that are needed in order to provide, right, so Life Moves has been a partner with us, providing trying to coordinate some of those coordinated services with the county. We had a homeless outreach team that we partnered with different internal agencies as well as broader agencies, whether they're county or nonprofit organizations. And with our housing team, we brought back into fully staffed and getting our PD staff in transition, trying to relaunch sort of that group again so that we can address
The reason why I mention it is because I live in the Belhaven, and there's a large, Willow runs adjacent from Ivy and Belhaven, but that portion there's a lot of homeless that are actually on the end, and that's not part of Belhaven or Menlo Park, it's East Palo Alto. And, it's, I don't know how to address that, that's, that's different city, and I think if I were to call that city, they wouldn't, I'm not part of East Palo Alto, although I am, it's kind of like on the border.
I'm sorry, I was just saying that area actually may be like, run by Caltrans, right? So it might be a state jurisdiction. And so again, that's where we have to bring in and do a more coordinated effort with different agencies.
Yeah, just with the help. Also, if you go on Bayfront, there's a large area that is, I'm assuming owned by Menlo Park. And there's a lot of encampments in that area, and it's so huge, but if you go through Bayfront, you are able to see the little encampments. in the, and I'm not saying, hey, kick them out, but I think some of that, we're providing all the resources as far as housing, but I think it goes beyond just that. It's more of a, they need assistance with mental.
It's a tough problem, you know, it is, like you're saying, it's so complicated and there's so many different needs.
Yeah, and I think, housing council, what is that organization that we attended the meeting for, this, housing council committee?
Yes, the housing committee.
Yeah, they're actually working
Karen.
with, a policy for homeless and also just touching on the health. So I would say maybe it would be great to focus on that.
It's called the Housing Committee.
Is it Housing Leadership Council?
Yep,
HLC, okay.
yeah, there were,
Oh,
yeah,
the-
Jeremy,
The day, you attended. Okay,
It was Tuesday.
Tuesday. So there's,
Tuesday.
Jeremy's actually working with, I guess they're having meetings about, the homeless encampment and how to address that. But I think one of the, you know, I think for me and just looking at the overall picture, I think it's not just housing because I think it's mental. Some people don't want to, you know, they didn't have challenges.
Yeah.
But I think, it's beyond that.
Yes, it's really challenging. We're all, so many people are so close to it, to that point, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry,
If I
midnight
could
together.
suggest in March, Californians will vote on the governor's mental health fund. So as a future agenda item, if that passes, we will have a lot of implications for the way that counties run their mental health facilities, and the hope is that higher acuity folks that need more support may be able to be served by the systems that we have now. So that's something that I'm desperate to understand if it passes.
I think
You and me both, okay.
in Redwood City, there's actually a group or a organization called City Streets. And they actually recruit homeless individuals, and they actually clean the streets in the city.
Yeah.
And, you know, I actually spoke to one of those individuals that was working that day. She said, oh my God, this program like saved me. I was like doing drugs and, you know, I was not okay mentally, but this gives me money and it helps me, you know, kind of get some money. So there are people that want to, it's just, you know,
You don't know where to start.
it's all, yeah.
One of those programs, it's a complicated problem that we can't really, is in some ways beyond the purview of the housing commission, and yet it's exactly what we need to be working on too, so it's like.
Well, that's one of the things that I saw here, that it hasn't changed, but, you know, I'm just thinking, well, I think it goes beyond just housing, we're doing all the right things,
Right,
but I think, yeah.
it's upsetting.
yeah, as Director Chow mentioned, Deanna mentioned that, yeah, the city is working with a number of organizations, including like those who do those wraparound services, because there are so many different facets of homelessness,
Right.
including mental.
Yeah, there's addiction counseling, childcare, job counseling.
Yeah, they're. So.
So with that being said, if that hasn't changed, I probably need to dive in just a little bit more, because with that being said, if I may ask, if I read the elements more in depth and I see something that maybe could be added, is that something that I would need to wait, or we would need to approve right now for what you're saying, or
Procedurally, I think,
or we can approve it and then later on?
in terms of wordsmithing the document, as mentioned, the council will be reviewing, this draft before you, or, on, next Tuesday, on the 23rd. Certainly, it's a public hearing. You can make your comments to the council. And, but I would suggest first, take a look at the programs, for example, program H3.E, talks about the city's collaboration with Life Moves. In addition, you can see that there are programs and policies that deal with special needs groups, including those with need mental health care. So I suggest you look through the housing element policies and programs first to see if that meets what you're looking for.
Thank you, and I wanted to bring it up because I know you want to vote on it tonight, but I didn't know if that was gonna interfere, certainly. Forward and comment on the 20th.
So as Tom mentioned, there are certainly a number of programs that address homelessness, but understanding that you're focused on mental health, you might want to review those policies and programs more.
So do we have a
Yes.
motion to approve and recommend?
I would like to do the motion, and if it's okay, I'd like to say, I'm not the only person in this room who has followed the housing element through its various cycles, this housing element in its various cycles. And, 20 years ago, Menlo Park was not considered a good actor in this space. They had deferred the housing element work for 2 decades. There was virtually no affordable housing built or produced. And in subsequent years, and in this draft, I think you see a real change in the resources of the city being put towards really looking at this as not just a compliance exercise, but a real possibility and opportunity to serve the needs of people in Menlo Park. I think it is a tremendous undertaking, and certainly there are some areas that could be tightened up, and it's, how many pages is it?
Question?
It's-
It was 700.
It's quite a document.
It represents a tremendous amount of work, and it's an up level on where the last one was. It's up level in several areas.
1,403 days.
Oh, sheesh. Thank you. So it was 700.
Something they've added to them in some page as well. Yeah.
But there's been a lot of progress here. I want to acknowledge that the city staff has clearly put in the time. Worked with HCD, which is not as easy. This is not a rubber stamp anymore. So it's under more scrutiny. And we've built a lot of housing since that one was passed, maybe 2012 or so. The first one that had been passed.
2015.
Well,
That was-
the one said 2013 and then 2014.
Yeah, so there was one that was passed maybe under duress, and then there was others that came afterwards. Having been in those meetings as an advocate and then later as a commissioner, we are in a vastly different place today, in a much different environment and context for having these conversations. And so I want to acknowledge that the city is in a different place and that staff has done some really good work here. And I think it will lay the groundwork for good housing to be built across the city. And so I'm grateful to be part of that process. And with that, I'd like to make the motion recommending the city council amend the 2023-2031 housing element of the general plan as conditionally approved by California HCD.
I second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Merriman, seconded by Commissioner Leach, to consider and adopt a resolution recommending the city council amend the 2023-2031 housing element of the general plan as conditionally approved by the California Department of Housing and Community Development. I will now take a roll call vote. Commissioner Campos, absent. Commissioner Leach,
Aye.
Commissioner Merriman,
Aye.
Chair O'Neill,
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Pimentel, absent, Commissioner Portillo,
Can I pass? Or can I?
abstain,
Yes, let's see.
abstain, Commissioner Portillo, Vice Chair Walker,
Aye.
the motion passes. One abstention and two absent.
So the,
Thank you.
housing, manager, Tim, do we have any, future on the agenda, future items? Any
Yeah, just
updates at all?
Item C3, we still have item C3, the Housing Commission meeting calendar.
Oh, yeah, approve the calendar.
Yes, housing manager, Tim, to introduce the meeting calendar for 2024.
Yes. So just a brief introduction, in the staff report as an attachment, per the city council instructions, we have outlined each meeting for the 2024 calendar year. And so understanding that there may be a couple meetings that maybe that need to be rescheduled July 3rd. But this is for the Housing Commission review. Please review those dates carefully and as part of it, as part of your review, staff will with your approval, staff will assume that your attendance for each of those meetings. And so yeah, if you could carefully review the calendar and that concludes my presentation.
Tim, what is the
Yeah.
color orange? What does the color orange represent?
Those are the dates where City Hall is closed. Federal holiday or holidays, I should say. In addition, City Hall is closed every other Friday. So those dates mark those when City Hall is closed.
Okay, do we have any, Tim, do we have any comments from the public? How about, okay, how about any clarifying questions from the Housing Commission? If not, do we have a motion?
I move to approve the Housing Commission meeting dates for 2024.
I second.
We have a motion, by Commissioner Leach, seconded by Vice Chair Walker to approve the Housing Commission meeting calendar for 2024. Take a roll call vote. Commissioner Campos, absent, Commissioner Leach,
Aye.
Commissioner Merriman. Aye. Chair O'Neill,
Aye.
Commissioner Pimentel, absent, Commissioner Portillo,
Aye.
Vice Chair Walker,
Aye.
the motion passes.
Okay, so do we have any individual commissioner updates? Okay, so do we have any, for the D2 future agenda items, do we have any recommendations for future agenda items?
I'll say, the two that noted down here, and we talked about that, there will be a housing element update, sometime in the spring, and March, is what we're aiming for, as well as, that, the state mental health bonds, as a result of that, and we keep that on radar.
Yeah.
Okay, so D3, Staff will provide.
The only other thing to keep in mind is that our MGC commissioners in this county, so that Gina Chapman and Canada will be voting on the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority's work plan that involves pretty extensive programming for potential development or in November. And counties have to put forth the do their expenditure plans by June. So there is something of an exercise to align with the county, is what the county resources as programmed by the authorizing legislation, how that fits in the work plan. Here, for instance, the county, I don't know if they will do this, but they could choose to do homeownership programs up to 120%. But that would be very interesting for then, how you might sequence some of the work in the work plans. If you wanted to position everything to be ready, to receive that, those potential influxes. Starting to look at that a little bit, it's, by statute, fairly specific, with protection and preservation and production. Can't believe I got that on last. But some of it could, it could be $2 billion for the county to demonstrate on the record file to see if the working collaboration with their efforts to, the county's efforts to do this exercise that they feel kind of moving to do. I don't know if that means asking the county member to talk to us or providing an update on yourself, but I'll leave that to you there. Cool.
Off of one.
Well, they actually are making the counties do it now in advance by 2 extent. So that's the thing that's a little funky about the process to just keep an eye on. Right?
D3, do we have any staff updates?
Just in addition to future agenda items, in February, we do have, tentatively scheduled a BMR agreement that the, Housing Commission will consider. And then, as I mentioned in March, we will bring the Housing Element Annual Performance Report to the Housing Commission for your review. Other than that, no additional staff updates.
Okay, in that case, I will adjourn the meeting. This is now, let's see, 7:29 p.m.
7:29 and
Did I-
55 seconds, yeah.
Okay, I'm glad I got the time right. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen and staff and housing commissioners. I'll see you guys next month.
And you be careful there.
Safe
Hurt
travels.
yourself.
Safe travels.
I'm going back to sleep. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.